Welcome back. Sometimes in our games we need to make decisions based on some conditions, and this will allow us to execute pieces of code only if these conditions are met. So let's look at the following example. So let's say we are hungry. So if we are hungry, then we want to eat. And else if we're not hungry, let's say then we sleep. Okay, so if we're hungry, we're going to eat fries or a burger or pizza or all the good stuff that will make us satiated and happy while we're eating it, but potentially not so happy long term if we only eat this kind of stuff. So otherwise, we are going to sleep. So if we are not hungry, then let's just sleep because we are full, and sleeping is just amazing. Taking a nap is great and all of the good stuff. So the actions that we're going to do inside of the curly brackets, so inside of here, are going to be the ones that we run in the if condition. So if this thing here is true, then we run the code here. Otherwise, in all the other cases, so if it's not true, we're going to do this. In this particular case, it's quite simple. So we are either hungry or we're not hungry. But of course, we can make it a little more complicated. And we're going to have plenty of examples where that's going to be the case. So let's look at this particular if statement here. So we have a Boolean called isPlayerInAir, which is true in this case. So we are creating this variable isPlayerInAir, which is of type Boolean, and we set the value to be true. Then we are comparing if isPlayerInAir, which means if this variable is true, then deploy a parachute. So in that case, we're going to deploy the parachute here, and if the player is not in the air, then we're going to jump. So let's say we had a game where we can press a button which will make the player jump, but if he's already in the air, then we're going to deploy a parachute which will make him slow down. So this is how we could manage it using if statements. We're saying if a condition is met, do something. If it's not met, do something else. So let's look at another example here. Here we have a float called distance to ground, and it equals 0, which means the player is on the ground. Then we check if the distance to ground is actually 0, which is true in this case. And if it's true, we will make the player jump. Now we have this thing that is called else if. So we don't have else as we had before, we have else if, which means we have another condition that we're checking. Here we're checking if the distance to the ground is greater than 10 meters, we will make the player scream. That could be because the player is way up high and he's too far in the air and he's so afraid and he starts screaming. Now we could have an else block which would cover all of the other cases. So for example, the distance between 1 and 10 meters off the ground. So there the player could do something else. We could run a particular animation or whatever we can come up with in our game. So you can see you can have an if condition. Then you have an else if condition, that you can have multiple more else if conditions, and then finally you can have this else condition as we saw it here. So you're not limited to one or the other, but what is always important, you have to have the if statement first, then you have the else if statements, and then at the end you have the else statement. The else covers all of the other potential cases. So in the case where you just have a true or false statement, there will only be two cases, right? So you can either be true or it can be false. But if you are comparing numbers, for example, then it's a different story. So you could say for a set of numbers, we want to do this. For another set of numbers, we want to do that. And for all of the other numbers, we want to do something entirely differently. And the same goes for strings. You could even compare words, so to speak. So now let's see how we can connect this with our game where we get the user input and where we have our random number, and let's see how we can compare those two and see what we want to do if they are the same and what we want to do if they are not the same. So see you in the next video.